catastrophe in an instant.
That's why.
You know the feeling of finding a really good podcast? Or the feeling of someone always being there, like your favorite radio show? Stream CBC Podcasts, CBC Music, and CBC Radio anytime, anywhere. Download the CBC.
This is CBC News. At 12 o'clock, we're at minus 13 degrees with mainly cloudy skies over downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon, I'm Matt Humphrey. The death of a middle-aged man waiting to be seen in a Winnipeg emergency room yesterday should never have happened. That comes from Vilko Zabogar. He was the lawyer for the family of Brian Sinclair. Sinclair was the Indigenous man who died while waiting for 34 hours for care at the HSC Emergency Department in 2008. An inquest came up with 63 recommendations to prevent something similar ever happening again. Zabogar says those recommendations are Sinclair's legacy to prevent more deaths like the one we saw yesterday.
Protocols for having wristbands and regular checkups on people in the waiting room with certain intervals of time and so on, having volunteers, having other people, having a number of redundancies. And I guess I'd like to know if that's been done or not.
Yesterday's death is at least the fourth person in 2 years to have died waiting in a Winnipeg emergency department. A prominent Liberal MP has decided not to run for the leadership of the party. Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc says he has been urged by a number of fellow Liberals to mount a campaign to replace Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. But LeBlanc says he has other priorities to focus on.
Last night, and then after sleeping on it, I decided that the most important thing I should do over the next few months is my job as Minister of Finance and Intergovernmental Affairs. So I've already reached out to Premier Ford, for example. Hope to see him in Toronto in the next couple of days, and I will be solely focused on the real economic threat that American tariffs represent to the Canadian economy and to Canadian workers.
The federal Liberal caucus is meeting today in Ottawa to establish the guidelines needed for the leadership campaign. As for committed candidates, former British Columbia Premier Christy Clark has yet to formally announce if she's running, but she has a team in place which has been in discussion with more than 100 Liberal organizers across the country. In his ongoing comments about the United States potentially acquiring Canadian territory, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump is calling the border dividing our two countries an artificial line. And Trump's musings about Canada are similar to what he's saying about Greenland and the Panama Canal. Richard Madden has more from Washington.
Leaders of Panama, Denmark, that owns Greenland, and of course Canada, are all pushing back on Trump's proposed land grab. In fact, last night, Ontario Premier Doug Ford went on one of Trump's favorite channels, Fox News, and made the case.
I get it. You know, President-elect Trump is a real estate tycoon. He's made billions. But that property's not for sale. As simple as that.
Now, lawmakers are pointing out that both Canada and Denmark are part of NATO, so Trump's unlikely annexation of these countries would invoke Article 5, which would require the U.S. to basically fight against themselves. It's an implausible situation. Now, other lawmakers believe this is a legacy issue for Trump. Expanding America's territory would be historic for any president. So we'll see how far Trump goes with this. He hasn't even been sworn in yet, but he's once again captured attention around the world. Richard Madden, CBC News, Washington.
Staying in the United States, at least 2 people have died in the wildfires burning out of control in and around Los Angeles. New fires started overnight and are being fanned by winds reaching 100 kilometers an hour. Tens of thousands of people are under evacuation alerts. Jim McDonald, the city's police chief, says the fires are unprecedented and unpredictable. He's encouraging residents to heed official warnings.
And so I would ask you to take these warnings, these orders to evacuate very seriously. As you've heard over and again, be ready to go. Pack what you need up, but then please comply with these orders. We don't give them, put them out lightly. When we believe that you're in the path of the fire, we're going to order that evacuation.
Officials say there are not enough firefighters to deal with flames of this magnitude. Strong winds and low humidity are forecast to continue. Those conditions will make firefighting efforts even more difficult. A Russian missile attack has turned one street of a Ukrainian city into a burning hellscape. Bodies are strewn across a road in Zaporizhia in eastern Ukraine. Russia had used guided missiles to target a high-rise apartment block and an industrial facility. Buses with passengers inside got hit with debris. City officials say at least 13 people are dead. Dozens more are injured. The Kremlin annexed part of the Zaporizhia region and continues to regularly shell the main city there, which is still under Ukrainian control. And finally, in entertainment news, Wicked, the movie Wicked, continues to make a mark.
It's time to try to find you, Rabbit. I think I'll try.
Wicked has landed a leading five nominations for the Screen Actors Guild Awards. That includes Best Ensemble, as well as individual nods for various actors, including Ariana Grande and Jonathan Bailey. It was also an especially strong showing for the Bob Dylan drama, A Complete Unknown, which scored 4 nominations. The SAG Awards will be streamed live on Netflix on February 23rd. And Ariana will play us out. Mainly cloudy, a few sunny breaks, a high of -10 today. Brandon, mainly cloudy, a high of -4 degrees. Dauphin, a high of -2 with mainly cloudy skies. Flin Flon clouds, a high of -1. Thompson, a chance of flurries, a high of -8. And in Churchill, a high of -14 with snow.
Good afternoon, Manitoba. You're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page. I'm Corey Funk. Good to be with you. Well, coming up this hour on the show, in our call-in conversation after 12:30, Trump's joke about Canada becoming the 51st state is starting to sound a lot more serious. Now, he's talking about using economic force to absorb Canada into the U.S. Well, coming up, we're asking how you feel about Trump's talk of annexation. We'll also have a professor of international relations on to help us understand what it means for Canada and the world and how seriously we should take it. That's what's coming up here on Radio Noon. But first here on the show, officials of Winnipeg's Health Sciences Centre continue to investigate after a middle-aged man died in the emergency room yesterday morning. The patient was initially assessed as low acuity, and HSC says many people were in the waiting room at the time, some sheltering from the cold weather. Marion Willis is with St. Boniface Street Links and a longtime advocate for the homeless community, and CBC's Chloe Friesen had a chance to speak with her yesterday.
Yeah, well, I can't really speak to the ER desk, but that there are people sheltering in waiting rooms to keep warm is not news. I mean, that's the story, I think, in hospital waiting rooms throughout the city, and that's particularly so at Health Science Centre and St. Boniface Hospital.
Why do you think HSC made sure to mention the fact during the press conference that folks were using the ER for shelter?
Well, because I think that, the healthcare system and the hospitals, are on the receiving end of considerable criticism, really, over the lengthy wait times, the backlog, trying to get into emergency rooms, getting stuck in emergency, people who need to get up to wards can't get on to wards. But, the truth is that homelessness, addiction, and mental health, those three aspects of it all have become significant challenges for hospitals to address. We run a 24/7 safe space with 20 beds that are designated to Winnipeg hospitals. And what we're trying to do is to work with the hospitals to help free up some of those beds. We also have a safe space that doesn't have beds. It's just kind of a drop-in center. And I can tell you that our 20 safe space designated beds are always full. And we always have people coming and going from the drop-in side. And if they're not coming to us directly from hospital wards or from emergency, they're coming to us from waiting rooms. And when we query people about why they're taking up, spaces in waiting rooms, it's because they're telling us that they don't feel safe going to downtown shelters, or depending on where you're homeless. And don't forget, we have homelessness spread out geographically across the entire city. So if you're homeless down South Pembina, it's not that easy to get to 190 Disraeli or to Main Street Project. So they find themselves, a safe, warm space to be, and nobody's going to remove anybody from a hospital waiting room who says they're there to see a doctor. We're also seeing by the number of people and the length of the hospital stays in some of our bigger hospitals like Health Science Centre and St. Boniface Hospital, that those beds on medicine wards have become shelter beds for people who are really difficult to house, because we're in an environment where there really hasn't been enough emphasis placed on linking people to income supports, finding housing, and getting people into housing. And, one area where government has really, sort of failed, and I don't mean any particular government, I just mean historically governments have failed, is to provide, the supports to organizations to provide the wraparound supports, the level of supports that it requires actually to get somebody housed and keep them housed. So, in some ways, hospitals have been expected to provide a service that normally is provided by shelter services. And, that's not fair. It kind of puts hospitals in a very challenging set of circumstances. I mean, they're only, if they fail to do that, then what's their other option? Mm-hmm. To release somebody who is ready to discharge, but is extremely vulnerable back to the street or to a homeless shelter. That only means that you're going to see that person back into emergency real soon. I've said this before, and I'll say it again, the 24/7 safe space models, like the one that we're operating at 604 St. Mary's, is a really good alternative, I think, to the large warehouse shelter programs that exist. I think it's easier to keep a space safe. It's easier to serve people when you're serving in smaller numbers. And given that homelessness is now scattered throughout the entire city, it makes a lot more sense to have a lot of smaller safe space programs that can just kind of meet people where they're at when they need support.
And you're saying that the fact that there isn't enough of these spaces is what's causing the overflow into ER waiting rooms?
Well, I think that's part of it, yeah. I think that there's very few options for people. Your only option, if you're not housed, is to make your way to Main Street Project, to 190 Disraeli, to Salvation Army, to these places where there's very large numbers of people at those shelters. They're often very chaotic. People consider them unsafe. I don't know whether they're safe or they're unsafe, but they tell us that they feel unsafe. And so when, just like anybody else, everybody seeks safety. Safety is a primary, sort of first human need, basic need to be met. And so you go where you can find that. And for a lot of people during the winter, it's waiting rooms in Winnipeg hospitals.
That's Marion Willis. She's with St. Boniface Street Links and a longtime advocate for the homeless community. She was speaking with CBC's Chloe Friesen.
Your local news at your fingertips.
CBC News has a local news app made for your phone or tablet.
So don't waste time scrolling for the local stories you want. Just download the app to get the information that matters to you when it happens.
And how you want it.
Another way to get your local news. The CBC News app. Download it today.
$12:13 right now on Radio Noon, and still to come just ahead here, we're going to hear why a music teacher in Dugald has built up an impressive collection of vintage manual typewriters and the inspiration behind the hobby. Also, we're going to be opening up the phone lines after 12:30 because Canada, Greenland, and the Panama Canal all have one new thing in common. Trump wants to make them part of the U.S. We're going to open up those phone lines to hear how you feel about that expansionist rhetoric. And also, we're going to have a U of M International Relations prof on to talk about what that means for Canada and the world. Right now, though, let's take a quick look at your conditions across the province right now. In Winnipeg, we are sitting at minus 13 with the wind chill. Feels more like minus 24. We will be warming up to minus 10 today. Elsewhere in the province, Brandon, right now you are sitting at minus 9, mostly cloudy. In Churchill, you are actually our cold spot today in the province. You're sitting at minus 18 with some light snow right now. Dauphin, you're sunny right now, sitting at minus 3. Flin Flon, partly cloudy right now. You're sitting at minus 4. Some light snow in Gillam at the airport. Light snow, minus 13. Island Lake, light snow, minus 12. McCreary is our hotspot, sitting at 2 today. And Thompson, you're sitting at minus 10 with some light freezing drizzle. And once again in Winnipeg, at the Forks, we're sitting at minus 12. Well, if you're of a certain vintage, you likely remember taking typewriting class in school. Well, 40-year-old Dugald music teacher Cora Enns remembers that class very well. She thinks she's likely one of the last students in the province required to take the course. But the class and the teacher who taught it inspired her love of manual typewriters and a passion to collect the now obscure items. And Cora joins us now by Zoom to tell us more. Hello there.
Hello there.
So tell us a little bit about, I'm excited to hear about the inspiration behind it, but I just give us an idea of how big this collection is of typewriters that you've amassed.
Well, it's not too big because the typewriters themselves are quite large. So it's within reason. I have 5 typewriters that I really enjoy and treasure. And I kind of have a bit of a rule that once I find another that I like, I perhaps will have to part with one. So it's a one in, one out kind of thing.
Oh, reasonable.
Trying to be reasonable, but it's often when you're going to the thrift stores or you have a friend or a colleague who mentions that they do have a typewriter. Do you want it? And I'm like, yeah, I'll take it. I think I'll take it. So, yeah, so it's hard to say no. But again, if you're going to the thrift stores, you're encountering quite a few beautiful mid-century or older typewriters that are often in very, very good shape, have seldom been used, and they're beautiful. So it's hard to say no.
So why typewriters? Like, what got you into it?
Well, I'm a musician, and I love analog. Anything analog is amazing. Because as a musician, I play saxophone, I play flute. It's very tactile. It's although the instruments were developed with technology and made with technology, it is a one-way process. You have to play the instrument using your body, using air. It's physical, and something about the typewriters is similar to me. It's tactile, it's physical, it's right in front of you. You see the words being produced on the paper. And I find it very similar. I think of typewriters almost as musical instruments in some ways.
And I understand a lot of this was actually, inspired by that typewriting teacher and that class you took a long time ago.
Yes.
Tell me about what instilled that inspiration in you from that.
Well, the typewriting teacher I had in grade 9 was Mrs. Povey over here at Springfield Collegiate Institute in the same school division that I teach in. And I do remember that we learned typing on manual typewriters. It was very enjoyable. I loved the process, the fine motor skills, the drills that we went through. I just really remember that. And then when I started acquiring typewriters about 8 years ago, it wasn't too hard to bring back those skills and really work on the drills and take things slow and try not to make too many errors when you're typing. But it's that tactile part. I remember that from grade 9, and I like the process. It's really, really exciting.
And do you still use these typewriters that you collect? Like, do you type stuff out on there?
I do, yeah. I'll take out my drill pages and I'll work on using the first finger, space bar, whatever the drill is. Sometimes I do type out my assignments to students. In the past, I've done that just for practice, because there is no kind of, you can't rely on technology to do autocorrect or anything like that. So you really do have to work on your fine motor skills, remember the process and procedures for typing. I'm also an artist, so there are ways to use the symbols and the keyboard to layer and use it as a tool for art, making shading and forming shapes. So it can also be used to produce art because it's very similar to the print process, which is to strike ink onto a piece of paper. So there's similarities there as well.
And so you have this rotating cast of 5 typewriters
Yes.
constantly moving through your life. How do you acquire them? You said, is it mostly thrift stores, or and is there kind of one that's particularly special to you that you haven't replaced in a long time?
Yeah, there's all of the typewriters. I have 5 again, and they're mid-century profile typewriters, which means they're a little bit smaller, and they're a smaller profile, they're lighter, and they're more portable. My favorite typewriter is an Eaton's Viking Specified. So Smith Corona is probably one of the most famous, well-known typewriter brands or makers. And then Eaton's had its own like branded version of the Smith Corona typewriter. And it's kind of a unique typewriter, seldom found. But the one that I did find at the MCC on Chalmers in their vintage lane section is in mint condition. It's a seafoam color. It's very mid-century, very sleek. And it's got this like gold grill on the front, almost like an old automobile. It's very beautiful. And also the ping of the keys, it's got a real snap to the keys and a beautiful ring at the end of the line. So that's kind of something I'm drawn to, is the sound of the typewriter, because it's a musical thing as well. It's just very enjoyable to type on.
What do your friends and family think of your typewriter passion?
Well, since my family's okay with it, I get within reason. I don't have stacks of typewriters. I'm sure you saw the Winnipeg Free Press article about the gentleman in New York that has 200 in his basement. Mm-hmm. That's a lot. That's a lot of typewriters. So my family's okay with it. Now that my students and my colleagues here at school realize that I'm typing on typewriters, it's brought up a lot of memories for them, and they want to talk about, my grandmother's typewriter, or the time I jammed that typewriter, or what we did as kids, or when I took typing lessons at Springfield Collegiate Institute as well. A lot of stories. They're encouraging and excited about the story. The story of my typewriters.
And in terms of how you do use it as a teaching tool too, you said you use it for assignments, but do you actually get kids to sit in front of typewriters and use it as well?
Yes, on and off. I'm primarily a band teacher, so allocating time away from music instruction can be difficult. But during COVID, when we were unable to play instruments using air, it was very difficult. So what do you do with the students and to encourage them to keep on playing, or to encourage them to keep on giving to the community, that community enrichment and reaching out? I actually had the students write letters to local seniors, and portions of those letters were typed on the typewriter. So the students did learn how to, hand position, how to, indent, all that stuff. Like we're actually tactile using the typewriters, and they got pretty excited about it. Yeah.
And I guess the parallels between a typewriter and maybe a tuba, the stakes are the similar case. If you hit the wrong button, it either makes the wrong note or gives you the wrong letter, right? So there is certain, is there some parallels there too?
It's a process of, perfection. Right. That's what it is. It's learning, fine motor skills for sure.
Well, Cora, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon, and thanks for telling us all about your typewriters.
I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day.
That's Cora Enns. She is a music teacher in Dugald.
Horse riding Ben Cartwright selling cars.
A bonanza of beauty and value.
Sheriff Andy likes his coffee in an instant.
That's why you get that real perk flavor in your cup.
And Walter White insures your prescription.
Say my name.
From Bonanza to Batman, when fictional characters endorse brands. And speaking of brands, it's a brand new season of Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland and on CBC Listen.
12:23 right now here on Radio Noon, and our last guest, as you just heard, spent part of her childhood in front of a typewriter. But then fast forward to now to Gen Z, which was raised with the glow of a computer screen in their eyes. And then move even closer to now, Generation Alpha spent their childhood wearing face masks during the pandemic. And now that we are in 2025, there's actually a new generation in town. Enter Generation Beta. And for more than 25 years, Sean Lyons has been studying generational differences, and he's an Associate Dean of Research and Graduate Studies at the University of Guelph.
Typically, what we do when we study generations is wait until they're nearing adulthood to really determine, first of all, if they are a unique generation, because it's not automatic that a generation comes along at regular intervals like a bus stop. And then what's going to be the difference between that generation and previous generations? So the verdict is still really out about what this group is going to be, if they're going to be anything unique, because we still don't even really know that much about Generation Alpha. Generation X got its name from the Douglas Copeland novel Generation X, which came out in the 90s, which was talking about this post-boomer generation and, the struggles that they had getting established in adulthood. And people kind of got lazy from there on. Generation Y was the next group because Y comes after X. But then they quickly got the name Millennials because they sort of came to adulthood at the change of the millennium. But then we went back to Z, and, we ran out of letters. But I think we just kind of figured, after Z, have to come up with something, and they went to the Greek alphabet. When we talk about generations, we're talking about social change, and it doesn't happen instantaneously. So if you ask me, the children who were born this week, since January 1st, are they in any way different than the children who were born at the end of December? No. It's sort of an ebb and flow of social change that comes about. And often when we look at different issues or different markers of what might create a generation, we might pick different dates. So even scholars who study this, like I do, don't necessarily agree on a definite date. We sort of have ranges. And what we have seen in recent generations is pretty reliably, about every 15 years, we're starting to see some significant changes in how young people interact with the world. So I think what we're doing is speculating that the generation that came after Z, the Generation Alphas, they're hitting about 15 at their front end. So we're probably going to see something new taking shape, but they're babies. So they're doing baby things. The verdict is still very much out about what they're going to be like. But the drivers of generational change, which is parenting styles and technology and social change broadly, sort of progress towards social change, all of those things are happening at the same accelerated pace that we saw with the previous couple generations, and maybe even more so. And I think if there is something that we're going to say about this generation, it's going to be that they are fully integrated with AI, that they will have AI as part of their lives.
Sean Lyons is an Associate Dean of Research and Graduate Studies at the University of Guelph. Well, one thing that hasn't changed from generation to generation is that warm, fuzzy feeling we all get. I'm talking about love. And this song's, I guess, kind of all about that. From Manitoba's own Kendra Kay, this is Old-Fashioned Kind of Love.
Bacon in the oven, fresh lemonade in a jar. The kids and dogs in a one-eyed rooster running round the yard. That easy breeze through the back door screen is singing sweet and low. We're dancing in the kitchen to the sound of the fiddle coming from the radio. So let the world go crazy. We're gonna be just fine. I wouldn't trade it, baby, for any other kind of life. All we need is a
Manitoba's own Kendra Kay with Old Fashioned Kind of Love. Well, stay tuned here on Radio Noon. We are going to be opening up the phone lines as it's been very hard to ignore in the news. Canada, Greenland, Panama Canal, they all have one new thing in common. Trump wants to make them part of the U.S. Well, coming up after 12:30, we're going to open up the phone lines to hear how you feel about this expansionist rhetoric from the U.S.'s incoming president. We're also going to have a U of M international relations prof join us to talk about what that means for Canada and the world. That's all coming up on Radio Noon after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. At 12:30, we're at minus 17 degrees with mainly cloudy skies over downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon. I'm Matt Humphrey. As you've been hearing, the fallout continues after U.S. President-elect Donald Trump said he wanted to use economic force to absorb Canadian territory. Last night, Ontario Premier Doug Ford appeared on Fox News, and the host Jesse Waters grilled Ford about why Canadians might not want to join the United States.
If I were a citizen of another country and I was a neighbor of the United States, I would consider it a privilege to be taken over by the United States of America. That's what everybody else in the world wants, American citizenship. For some reason, that's repellent to you Canadians. And I find that personally offensive, Premier.
Well, you know something, Jesse? We're proud Canadians, just like there's proud Americans. And if we join together and take on the world with a great trade deal between us, I think that'd be fabulous. No one could stop us.
In case you missed it, on social media, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said there isn't a snowball's chance in hell that Canada would become part of the United States. Tens of thousands of people have been forced to flee their homes as 4 major wildfires are now burning out of control in and around Los Angeles. 2 of the fires started yesterday morning. The other 2 started overnight, and they're all being fueled by powerful Santa Ana winds. Steve Futterman has your details.
These fires continue to burn out of control, and these winds, in some cases, we've had gusts up to 160 kilometers an hour. Gives you an idea of what the firefighters are facing. They couldn't battle this fire from the air because it was just too dangerous. So it's been a ground attack, and they've not been able to do much. So these fires are going to go on probably for several days. Everyone's hoping that the worst destruction is over, but it's too early to tell. As long as these winds go on, it's going to be very difficult for firefighters to get the upper hand. The fires are taking place in various parts of the Los Angeles basin. The major fire that we've been focusing on is in Pacific Palisades. That's on the west side. It's near the ocean, near Malibu. And that fire has destroyed, I would say, dozens of homes. So many of these homes may be the most beautiful locations in the world on the Pacific Ocean. Steve Futterman for CBC News, Los Angeles.
And finally, Corey, I need to make a correction. The movie Wicked has gotten 5 nominations for the Screen Actor Guild Awards. During my previous newscast, I played the song Defying Gravity, and I mistakenly said the version I was playing was being sung by Ariana Grande. The entire Radio Noon team was quick to correct me. That version I played was actually played by Idina Menzel.
And since then, we now have a group of angry witches protesting outside of the CBC building. So thanks a lot for that, Matt.
My apologies.
I didn't notice. I was thinking my wife, who's a big Wicked fan, if she was listening, she'd be like, oh, no.
Yeah, no, I really stepped in at that time.
Oh, you'll get it right next time. Thanks a lot, Matt, for the
back
correction.
soon.
That's Matt Humphrey at our CBC News desk. Welcome back to Radio Noon. I'm Corey Funk. And also we have with us here in the studio is Riley Lachuk with a look at your weather, which is looking increasingly better and better.
You know what? Someone asked me to describe the 7-day forecast in the office earlier, and the phrase I used was emotional roller coaster.
Okay, yeah.
So some minus single-digit highs, a plunge back into the deep freeze, and then a wild warm-up into mid-late next week again. So take with it what you will. A little bit of snow on the way for some of us in Manitoba. Temperatures right now, minus 12 in Winnipeg, Gimli, Steinbach, Sprague, minus 12s as well. Victoria Beach, minus 11. Brandon, minus 9. Dauphin, the Paw, minus 3 at the moment. Thompson, minus 10. So a bit of a spread. We're looking at a warm front starting to push its way into Manitoba, bringing already into parts of the western part of the province a little bit of flurry activity as well, particularly around Swan River, the Dauphin region, looking at a few stray flurries kind of north of Dauphin right now. So That's all riding in on a warm front that is bringing some flurries, a little bit of light snow to parts of Saskatchewan this afternoon, even some freezing rain to parts of central Saskatchewan. So a little bit of a widespread of conditions coming our way as we head into the evening, into the overnight period. So peaks of sunshine. We have seen a little bit of sunshine already this morning in Winnipeg. We're under a little bit of a hole in the cloud cover there. Expect some ebbing and flowing in terms of sky condition through the day today. So clouds do fill in. Maybe we'll see the sun once more before we get the day through here. But once we get into the evening, that warm front, that area of low pressure begins to push in, brings with it the risk we could see some freezing rain, particularly around Dauphin, Roblin, Russell through the late afternoon into the evening hours. For the Red River Valley, once we get into the overnight period, we've seen temperatures cooling a little bit. We'll be into mainly a snow event for us. Really not talking about any major accumulation, but certainly when you wake up tomorrow morning, do expect that we'll see at least a dusting of snow through much of the Red River Valley. Lingering flurries through the day tomorrow. Again, some peaks of sunshine through the afternoon across southern Manitoba. And again, even into the evening, I think we do have a lingering chance of some flurries here in the Winnipeg region before we start to see a little bit of clearing once again once we get into the day on Friday. Again, in terms of accumulation, really for southern Manitoba, trace to maybe a couple of centimeters depending on where you are locally. But a separate system bringing by lunchtime Friday at least another 10 centimeters to the Hudson Bay Coast, Churchill into Shamattawa. A lot of that snow falling through the day today. Minus 11 this afternoon in Churchill, minus 7 in Thompson. Winnipeg, our afternoon temperature minus 10, minus 6 in Brandon, minus 3 in Dauphin this afternoon. We'll see the temperature warming up to minus 2 tomorrow, minus 13 for Friday, minus 9 for Saturday, and then we're back into minus 17s, minus 18s to start next week, Corey.
Thank you very much, Riley.
You're welcome.
That is our CBC weather specialist, Riley Laychuk. This is Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Corey Funk, and it is now time for our call-in conversation. We are opening up the phone line, 204-780-0893. That's 204-780-0893, because U.S. President-elect Donald Trump says he's willing to use, quote, economic force, unquote, to absorb Canada into the U.S. And he hasn't ruled out using military force to take Greenland and the Panama Canal. So this expansionist rhetoric is raising eyebrows here in Canada and around the world as citizens and officials try to determine whether he is making just blustering statements or an actual plan. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, as we heard Matt say earlier, he says, quote, there isn't a snowball's chance in hell that Canada would become part of the United States, end quote. So what do you think about Trump's talk about annexing Canada? You can call us. Here's the number again, 204-780-0893. That's 204-780-0893. You can also text us, 204-588-7355. That's 204-588-7355. Also, if you have any questions about the implications of his comments, you can call us as well, because we have with us now Andrea Charon. She is a professor of international relations and director of the Center for Defense and Security Studies at the University of Manitoba. Good afternoon to you, Andrea.
Good afternoon.
So you're currently teaching an intro international relations class. So I'm curious, because I'm having trouble making sense of all this. How are you explaining Trump's expansionist comments to your students?
Well, I think for all international relations professors, we've been thrown a real curveball, because we are trying to teach the theory behind world order. And since the end of World War II, the world order has sort of presupposed that sovereign states were how the world was ordered, and those borders were inviolable. Long are the days where other states would invade states to take territory. You can't meddle in the domestic jurisdiction of states to say you should be practicing this religion or you should have that government. Enter President-elect Trump, and he seems to have thrown away the rule book. And so for me as a professor and for students and indeed Canadians and people around the world, this is very discombobulating, because the way we thought the world operated perhaps is not the way that the largest and most powerful state in the world, the United States, may use in the future.
We have Ian on the line. Hi there, Ian.
Hey there.
Hey, what's your thoughts?
I just think surely to God nobody's taking this guy seriously in his rhetoric. There's no way that the American people or the Senate are going to allow him to take up armaments to take over Canada, take over Greenland, take over the Panama Canal. The guy's a lunatic.
Thank you very much for that, Ian. I'll tell you this, Andrea, this is also a conversation we were having editorially. We're saying, how much should we be even talking about this? How seriously should we be taking it? Because on one hand, it could very well just be bluster, but on the other hand, it's still the incoming president of the most powerful country in the world saying that they plan to take territory from other sovereign nations. So there's this conflict we're even feeling here editorial about talking about this. So how seriously do you think we should take his comments?
Well, I certainly sympathize with the caller, but I do think we do need to take it quite seriously, and that's because we are very exposed and quite vulnerable for a variety of reasons. We are economically dependent on the United States because of things like NAFTA. It is the largest trading bloc in the world, but it means that we do send an enormous percentage of our exports to the United States. And so if he weaponizes trade and puts in place punishing tariffs, we are going to feel the economic effects very quickly, including a recession, if not even more dramatic. And that may force our hands. We don't want to be in a position where we're reacting to this rhetoric. What we want is to be in a strong and stable position so that we can maintain our sovereignty. And this is forcing Canada to look at its trade relationships, especially interprovincially. It's easier to trade with the United States than it is within Canada. Here's an opportunity for us to fix that.
We've also got Shane on the line. Hi there, Shane.
Hi.
Hi, what are your thoughts?
Well, kind of despite all the scuttlebutt about Trudeau, clearly he has the understanding of how Canadians feel about annexation to the United States, and speaks it. However, I worry about a guy named Poilievre and how he would use it to his personal gain. He certainly is not the statesman that Trudeau is, and I certainly have no trust that he would just jump ship and join the Americans, because he in so many ways resembles them.
Poilievre has gone on the record saying that he is similar to Trudeau. Says that I should have the quote handy with me here, but he did say that Canada will not be joining the U.S. He doesn't intend to make that happen. So I just want to put that on the record as well. Thanks for that, Shane. That is Shane on the line. There is it's so like you said, it's disorienting, it's discombobulating as well, isn't it, Andrea? Because Trump says he only wants to use economic force to get Canada to join the U.S., but at the end of the day, he is still talking about taking over a sovereign nation. So, what kind of discussions do you think Canadian defense officials are having about his comments?
Well, it's not only that he's threatening to annex a sovereign state, but we are the United States' closest ally, friend. We are partnered in the joint defense of North America. And so I do wonder if President-elect Trump fully appreciates that to defend and secure the United States, it has been reliant on allies, especially Canada, neighboring Greenland, and NATO allies for at least 60 plus years in order to make sure that together we are stronger. And so at a time when we're increasingly concerned about Russia and its egregious annexation of Ukraine and the designs of China, it just doesn't seem to make sense that the United States would then imperil allies at a time when we need this idea of state sovereignty to hold fast. And it's one that the United States codified in the UN Charter. I mean, the UN Charter starts, "We, the peoples of the United Nations," and it mimics the US Constitution. And the idea was that from now on, We are going to stop meddling in the domestic jurisdiction of states. We're going to do away with colonization, and we are going to hold fast these territorial borders.
And I got the quote officially here from Poilievre. So he says, Poilievre to Trump said, Canada will never be the 51st state. So that is the exact quote there. Feel free to weigh in. What are your thoughts on Trump's comments on annexation of Canada, Greenland, the Panama Canal? You can give us a call, 204-780-0893. That's 204-780-0893. And we do have Brenda on the line. Hi there, Brenda.
Hi, how are you today?
Good. What's on your mind?
Well, I think we should take what Trump is saying seriously. I think that this is part of a broader plan that has been, being laid for a long time. But I think in some ways, ironically, he's done Canada a big favor because we've been divided by, some very hateful politics on the part of Poilievre for 4 years now. And I think he's left himself in a bad position here because Canada's going to be united in this cause. And I don't think Poilievre is really going to represent us well. Yeah, I mean, he's funded by Stephen Harper, which runs the IDU, which is, basically an international cabal of all these autocrats that want to, get rid of democracy. So I think that Poilievre is going to be this election is going to be about this issue, I think, and he's going to be a very weak candidate in that respect. My kudos to Trudeau. I think his statement was far more genuine and believable than what Poilievre had to say. And I just want to say thank you to Trudeau for getting us this far as a united country. And I just suggest to everybody listening, if you're unhappy about this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be writing letters to every single senior member of Congress in the United States and saying, what are you going to do about this? It's time to kneecap Trump. And they're the only ones that can do it. We can't do anything, really.
Thanks for your perspective, Brenda. I really appreciate it. That is Brenda. And I'm even just thinking here, I think to a lot of us, this sort of rhetoric or this talk even of Canada taking over or U.S. taking over Canada, might feel new, but actually historically, Andrea, it's not. Can you kind of tell us about the last time that America, at least talked openly about taking over Canada and how it compares to now?
So it wasn't necessarily openly, but until after World War I, there were still plans on the U.S. books for a potential invasion of Canada. And if you go further back when Canada was a Dominion and under the United Kingdom, I mean, there was definite friction between the United States and the United Kingdom. And with a much smaller population, it was potentially possible for the United States, which has always had a much bigger population and military, that maybe they could have. But there's a reason they didn't. North America is a very, very large continent. And, countries that overstretch themselves quickly run into problems. And there are great advantages to having a stable, democratic Canada that is in control of 40% of the North American landmass. That takes some of the pressure off of the United States. And this has, arguably allowed them to be the hegemon of the world because they didn't have to worry about their backyard. They could be out into the world. And so there has been a history of friction between the U.S. and Canada, but we've always managed to get past it, to work around it. And this is proven in the North American Aerospace Defense Command. It is a unique binational command that means that it's Canada and the U.S. together that are not thinking just about the defense of Canada or the United States, but North America. And if the United States was to try and annex Canada, they're actually going to damage themselves because they are highly dependent on Canada for much of the information in terms of our radar systems for their defense, and the hundreds of MOUs between Canada and the U.S. that mean that the various federal agencies work together to share information to share the load of defending and securing North America.
We have Jorge on the line. Hi there, Jorge.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, good, good. What's on your mind?
I think we, I heard one of your callers talking about how we shouldn't be taking this seriously. It's just blabbering. I think a threat's a threat, and we should consider it as a threat. I think we should be taking it very seriously. I think this is it's like a throwback to Hitler trying to take over Europe. It is manifest destiny. I grew up in Latin America. I'm a Mexican person, and I'm disparaged by this whole thing. It's just we've always been afraid of them becoming an open empire. Up until now, they've been a sort of a hypocritical, soft empire. They separated Panama from Colombia so they could have the canal. They did that through the CIA and through other channels. Now they're actually talking about taking over a whole country, taking over Greenland, crossing over to Canada. I think we should be taking it seriously as a threat. And I, for myself, over my dead body, no, thank you. I would not like to join their contingent or whatever they want to call it. And it's already a cesspool, and they can have it. And we have a really great thing going on in Canada. And I'm kind of sad and offended that there's not more people raising their voice in the U.S. to say, stop talking about that, you moron. Nobody's saying that because it's a stupid idea, and it's a ridiculous comment to make. But it's not beyond the realm of possibility for this person who is power drunk at this point. And so I think we should be taking it very seriously, and I think our government officials should be taking it very seriously, and they should be just publicly be taken very seriously. I don't think it's a joke, and I think it's too long to be played out as a joke any longer.
Thank you very much for those thoughts, Jorge. Andrew, I mean, he said yesterday that he isn't ruling out military force to take Greenland from Denmark and even the Panama Canal. So, if I mean, we're kind of playing speculation here, but if he actually goes ahead with something like that, what could that mean for, the international order and international security in general?
Well, it certainly would be a rift in international law. And it's really difficult for me as a professor of international relations who, is teaching all about the history and the fact that it took 2 world wars and millions of people to die for the United States to be the one to say, from now on, these are the rules that we are going to abide by. And the United States used to pride itself on not being a colonizer. It wasn't in the business of trying to take over states, although it certainly was entangled in many conflicts around the world. So this really is sort of an about-face in what the United States has stood for in international organizations for many years. I think the United States is going to find itself, were it to, try and take over Greenland and the Panama Canal and Canada. I mean, one of the key ingredients is that the people on the ground need to be happy with this situation. I mean, there are civil conflicts around the world that prove that, the people's vote matters. And that would be the first impediment. But just the vast territory that's involved here is going to badly overstretch the U.S. and its military. And I'm sure military personnel are advising President-elect Trump that this is something that they could not manage, in addition to worry about the Pacific and keep commitments in NATO and all of the other commitments they have around the world.
We've got Alfred on the line. Hi there, Alfred.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call.
Yeah, no, what do you got to say?
Well, about our defense, it's been lacking for so long. We have nothing to help even the United States or to defend ourselves. All the governments we have don't seem to want to spend money there. They'll spend money on every stupid thing but defense.
Thanks for that, Alfred. I mean, what do you make of Alfred's thoughts there? I mean, how it feels so strange to ask out loud on the radio, but how prepared should Canada be for some sort? I mean, like as we said, Trump said he's not considering using military force. So I just want to make that very clear. But how prepared should Canada be for some sort of, dare I say, invasion?
Well, I think, we would exhaust all the other tools in the toolkit before we would resort to any kind of force. And to the caller's point, we do have a small military, but it is a very, very well-trained military, and it is embedded with many of the U.S. units around the world. And so, again, I think President-elect Trump has to think about, if you are going to attack allies who are embedded with your military, that creates its own security dilemma. So I think this is why you're seeing federal agencies across Canada making sure that they are able to respond to the fears of Trump. And this is an opportunity for us to look at things like our military, our security operations. And there's a benefit to Canada that the more secure Trump feels that Canada, the security that Canada can provide, it is better for Canada as well.
In the last minute here, we've got Damien on the line. Hi there.
Hi there. How you doing today?
Good. What's your thoughts?
Good. Well, just listening and hearing Brenda's comments earlier about taking the time to write all the senators in the states, I think that's a great idea, because she's right. We can't do anything up here besides vote when our time comes, but shedding light on the topic to everybody from Canada, I think is a really important thing, because we know that Trump likes to speak, and it's hyperbole, and he kind of puffs himself up. So it is a threat that we do need to take seriously, but how else are we supposed to change anything? So I just wanted to comment that I agree with Brenda's comments. So if you have time, write to the senators for starters, and then just watch Polyev and watch what he's doing, because I think he's another scary one that if we're not paying attention to his, even though he said he would never let Canada join the States, we've heard things said before that have gotten about face. So yeah, just have to be aware.
Thank you very much, Damien. I'll leave the last words with you, Andrea. I know, maybe this conversation we're having now will just fizzle off over time, and maybe it is all just bluster, but what's been said has been said. So, how much will this talk of expansion right now permeate the U.S.-Canada relationship going forward, or knowing that this is at least something that our president, not our president, sorry, that President Trump wants?
Well, I think we need to remind Canadians and the United States that Canada and the U.S. have this really special relationship, and we have so many bilateral and binational committees that work together day in, day out to support both Canada and the United States. Now is the time for Canadians to remind the United States of that and to point out to them what they lose out by putting us in this very insecure position. It sucks the oxygen out of the room. And then things like the joint management of Great Lakes and dealing with climate change and all of these other, especially existential threats to both the United States and Canada, will not be discussed because we are all scrambling to deal with the idea of the day that President-elect Trump seems to be seized of.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Andrea, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
My pleasure.
That is Andrea Sharon. She's a professor of international relations and director of the Center for Defense and Security Studies at the University of Manitoba. Well, that is a wrap for the Wednesday edition of Radio Noon. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. Thank you to all the callers who called in with your thoughts. Really appreciate your time and your perspectives. Also, big thank you to everyone who helped put together today's show. Our technician, Marshall Hodgins, our director, Sierra Sanders, our producer is Wendy Parker, and our YouTube live stream producer is Kevin Nipatebo. I'm Corey Funk, and whatever you find yourself doing today, especially as things get a little bit warmer, hope you find yourself doing something you love with the people you love. Coming up next on CBC Radio 1, Bookends. Have a good one.